I mean, I am fresh out of the shower. My hair is slightly wet, Kent. Maybe that's why it looks different.
Looks pushed back.
Used to be. Click.
There's a lot of decisions that this football team is going to have to make here in the next month or so. You've got some key mile markers with the NFL Combine and then free agency, and there's a lot leading up to those things to be talking about with this team. Let's talk.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. For Brett Goodwin and Alan Tipton, taking over the Learning Tree, a beloved 25-year-old toy store, was about more than business. It was about keeping the magic alive for Kansas City families. Emprise Bank made the transition seamless, guiding them through the SBA loan process so they could focus on building community and inspiring young minds. Emprise Bank, your partner in possible. Visit emprisebank.com/SBA to learn more. That is Emprise Bank, member FDIC. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate it. I am very excited to be talking to the very slick-backed hair of Matthew Lane. Some might even say pushed back.
Oh, this is definitely pushed back. I mean, this is not slicked back. It used to be slicked back, but now it's pushed back. Okay,
Matty, you were like a Missouri fan growing up, right?
Yes, yeah, because I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, so I was a Missouri fan. Yes.
So you know who Quinn Snyder is, right?
I am aware of who Quinn Snyder is. Correct.
For the audio only listeners, the hair is giving Quinn Snyder. It is very Quinn Snyderish right now.
Okay.
You look like you haven't slept in a week and are trying to draw up some crazy offensive schemes. So, just
you know what? That kind of checks out, actually.
Actually, it does. I just realized.
Hold on.
Maddie's been sending us Andy Reid play designs all day in the text thread with Maddie or with Craig.
I may have done that.
You're
onto something here.
Yeah,
you pulled on that thread and you got to the end of it real fast.
That wasn't even hard. That was even hard to do.
Yet.
We were looking at some Andy Reid play calls, trying to figure out, trying to decipher some stuff a little bit, trying to figure out what some of their formational stuff is. I think I figured out what their Y ISO is. I was pretty proud of myself for that. Trying to figure out their slot rules, all that kind of stuff. You're like, oh yeah, I got it.
No, it's all. There's just some digging. There's a lot of work. Hey guys, shockingly, Andy Reid's playbooks, even from that are maybe slightly outdated or just have pamphlets of some of his rules and stuff, kind of complicated. Who would have thunk?
They really are. We've got. I'm gonna pull it up. We've got. Let's see here. We've got 82 Tampa.
Oh yeah, it's part of the Tampa family.
Gun tray right, flex, bust, G trips, bust, Nas.
There you go. There was a lot there.
Yep, we've got there's some good ones in here. But we were goofing around with that a little bit earlier today, and Maddie hasn't slept in days, so everything plays out. Jesse Bates asking, where is Herbie? If you haven't heard, Herbie Teope is joining KC Sports Network. We are going to have a lead reporter here at KC Sports Network. We are so excited to be welcoming him. Obviously, very thrilled that he will be providing coverage to all of you at KC Sports Network. So make sure you are subscribing to KCSN.com so you'll be getting updates from him. Make sure you're using your email address, getting that in there. So we are quite excited to be welcoming Herbie here to KC Sports Network. Okay, so I think pretty ready to turn the page, I think, after a weekend off and getting some rest here and start thinking about the offseason, grinding away. Oh, what kind of page are you turning? All kinds of pages over here, Maddie. You've turned
to get away from that game. I'm turning the entire book. Let me tell you.
Yeah. We're good. We're good with that. I'm so never watching that game again. That is just not happening. I'm ready to focus on next year. I will say the KCSN draft guide is going to be launching, I think, tomorrow. So keep an eye out on that. There's going to be some links there for that. We'll be launching the pre-orders for all that. And book is making great progress. We've been grinding away since October on this thing. I can't wait. I'm very excited for this draft. Very excited for this draft. This is going to be a fun one. I think I was saying on Twitter, I'm about as far into the draft as I've been in a while. Like as far as like this time of year, I feel the farthest I've been in several years. So I feel very good about where I am with this class.
I think we've been cruising along. Like overall, I think everyone's been cruising along pretty good at it this year. So yeah, it's been a nice pace so far this year.
And you, as the guy that puts the book together when it's all said and done, I can't tell you how excited I am that we are ahead of progress.
Okay, I won't start writing until a week and a half before the write-ups are due anyway.
I will start writing them for you if you do that, which maybe that's exactly what at least they'd fit on one page if I wrote them.
I know. You guys get less information.
The only person I have to change the font for on these one-page scouting reports for the KCSN draft guide is Matt Lane. Every time. But anyways, appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Wanted to talk about some of the key decisions that are going to be coming up for this Chiefs football team. I find this to be a pivotal offseason, I think, for the organization. This kind of feels like another transition into another Mahomes era almost, right? Because the Chiefs have benefited from the last few drafts where they've, part of the reason that this team has been so successful and has been able to be in a position to three-peat is because they've drafted, very well in 21 and 22. The bill is coming due on the 2021 class. The bill will be coming due soon on the 2022 class as well. So there are some very difficult decisions that are kind of coming for this team. There are, some things this team's going to have to address, both with, internal options or free agents walking, but also just people outside the building. So we figured we would talk about the 5 key decisions for the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason that they're going to have to be making and how they're going to navigate, and just kind of talk through all these a little bit. And I think the first offseason decision ultimately is a decision that probably doesn't fall with the organization, but that falls more with Travis Kelce and his decision whether or not he is going to come back and play football for the Chiefs in this season. There's some reporting out there saying the Chiefs would like to see him back for one more year. There's been some buzz that he might not come back for the 2025 season. The first decision, and I think if you're looking at this offseason, I think there's a lot of chain reactions. There's a lot of cause and effect. There's a lot of things that are going to mold how this team approaches the draft, how this team to a degree approaches free agency based on some of the feedback information that they're getting and some of the decisions that they make here. And Travis Kelce, I think, is a big deciding, a big shift in how this offseason goes kind of stems around the decision that Travis Kelce has to make.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say this. I don't know if this decision is the biggest one that the Chiefs will have to figure out this offseason. I think they can function fine either direction of Travis Kelce returning or retiring or taking a contract or whatever the path they go down. I think they will be able to handle. So it's maybe not the most impactful decision, but I do think it might be kind of like the first one that they do have to figure out. They have to know, are they on the hook for his full cap hit, all the money going into next year? Do they have a tight end that at the very least they expect to be out there on every third down, that they expect to be a primary part of their passing game and still part of their functional part of their run game, even if the role maybe does have to diminish a little bit overall? Or are they going in needing all of that, but having this financial flexibility that him retiring would give them? So yeah, I don't know if it's the most impactful, but I do think it is the first one that we do have to know, that we really got to figure out. And it's so torn here. Travis Kelce's long been like one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. He has been even since he started to go on like this historic run of, putting up the greatest tight end stats ever. Like anybody that has listened to us for a long time knows I've always been a big Travis Kelce fan. He's just not the same guy anymore. And the writing's been on the wall. And the past 2 seasons before this, he's kind of been able to pull it together. But I think you saw this year, there was just nothing left to pull from. He's just not that same guy. And the problem is the Chiefs offense, especially with the injuries to Rashee Rice and the way that offense was functioning with a lackluster offensive line, and maybe a bunch of defenses still kind of catching up to what they are trying to do. They still needed him to be that guy to operate that offense. And when he wasn't, that's what, I think not the leading cause, but one of the leading causes to the offensive, like up and downs, the inconsistency all year was so many times in the past when they ran into these problems, Kelce would just go get open and be like, oh, I'm going to go run this freelance route and get open whenever I want to. He doesn't really do that as well anymore. And I think we've seen that show up on the film over and over again on the field. And I just think that, like, regardless next year, they got to revamp what the offense looks like, but they need to know if they're incorporating him a little bit, a lot bit, or not at all going in before they start making any other moves.
100%. He is, it's not as much about you're right. I think this team operates regardless of whether or not Travis Kelce is on the roster or not. I think they will be able to figure things out. But it just creates a stark difference because Travis Kelce's cap number for 2025 is $19.8 million. If he is to retire, the Chiefs will recoup $17 million in cap savings for the 2025 season. That is a large chunk of change that they will be able to utilize to help spread things around the rest of their roster and kind of leverage it that way. So it's there's some tough decisions that got to be made for this team if Travis Kelce is back. Now, that is not saying that I'm trying to push Travis Kelce out the door. I think, one, he's earned the right to play as long as he'd like. I think this team would welcome him back. Absolutely. I think Patrick Mahomes would love to have Travis Kelce back for one last ride. But I think how this team navigates this offseason and where they have to, find money elsewhere, what free agency decisions they might have to make because of this could be affected based on whether or not Travis Kelce is returned or not. So it's not necessarily I don't think it's necessarily holding this team back if Travis Kelce returns or anything like that. But I do think it creates two different distinct paths to how this team is going to approach the offseason. And you're right. It is the first decision really that's going to fall.
And it kicks everything else off from where they go from here. And I think we as Chiefs fans, and I'm sure in the building, there's a little bit of uncertainty. No one wants to push Travis Kelce out the door in the building or here based on who he is, what he's meant to the team. I mean, what he still means to the team now. And just the fact that how long he's been around, everything he's been through, right? Nobody is trying to get him just out the door. But if you start thinking about on the field, if he is back, there's significant changes that need to be had. If he's not back, there's significant changes that need to be had. And they're slightly different. They're a little bit opposite of what they're going to be, right? But either way, they kind of got to figure out this offense going into next year. And just the sooner they know if he's there or not, I think the faster they can get going on stuff. What we can't do is go back in the next year where Travis Kelce is maybe freelancing some of his routes, but not being able to get open and messing up the timing or the spacing of the rest of the offense. And I think that is an issue they ran into this year. I'm not saying that has to happen if he comes back. It's just, you got to understand that going forward, or you have to start getting Noah Gray ready to be that tight end one, or starting to look in for who's going to be available in free agency. If you don't think he's that, pay a little bit more attention in the draft, because you might need a day one starter versus a guy ready to go in 2 to 3 years. So it kicks off everything. And knowing Travis Kelce the way, we might think we do, because he's a very public figure right now with his own podcast and everything, I do not think he is going to string this along for a long time. I do think the Chiefs will know in relatively timely fashion if he plans on coming back. If he does, I assume there will be some kind of deal in place where he maybe won't be on the full 17 million. They might move some stuff around for that, but whether he comes back, doesn't, what it's going to be, I don't think you're going to get all the way until free agency to figure all that out.
I will be fascinated to see how the Chiefs approach the contract side of this and how that goes in the conversation between him and the team and how that affects potentially the decision there. I will say, I do think this team wanted to funnel the offense more through Rashee Rice this year, and things obviously worked out the way they did because of the injury. So I think that kind of, might have changed some things here for this season for Kelce and for the rest of the team, but that's hindsight. So who knows? We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Going through 5 key decisions that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be having to make this offseason. Thank you, everyone. Why are you laughing, Maddie?
Don't worry about it.
I
was reading the comments. No, I have not had a single drink of alcohol as of right now. I'm just slightly distracted right now. That's all.
That's nice to hear. Podcast co-host. Okay, so when we're looking at the kind of the key offseason decisions, we've talked about Travis Kelce and some of the ways that could shake some things up. I think there's both sides of the ball are going to be experiencing some big offseason decisions as it comes to retaining their own players. And there's key players on both sides of the ball that are going to be out the door or are eligible to sign elsewhere this offseason. And we will start with the defensive side of the ball. I think there's 2 key decisions here on the defensive side of the football. It's what do you do with Nick Bolton and what do you do with Justin Reid? Both of those players on the defensive side of the ball, some difficult decisions, some fascinating contract proposals, some fascinating contracts, I think, for both of them.
Yeah, and you're looking at like all the roster decisions the Chiefs have to make coming up. I think I've kind of narrowed it down, at least for me, and the way it works is Steve Spagnuolo is not going to lose both of these guys to free agency. At minimum, one's coming back. And then you start to really look at the way the roster is structured right now, where the holes are, the amount of money that both guys might require in free agency. It seems very logical to assume that only one of those 2 is going to be back. That could be wrong. They could make it work with both of them. It wouldn't be an entirely shocking thing. But if I'm just looking at it, you can't probably lose your 2 leaders up the spine of your defense, like right up the middle, 2 guys that are kind of the leaders on that side of the ball, the guys that get everybody else situated. And both these 2 players seem to come up with a lot of big plays when they need it. Those 2 plus Chris Jones are kind of their guys that make the big stops, the big plays when they need to. And so all season, I think we've kind of been in the spot, but I've all think, and most people have probably been leaning this way. Nick Bolton's the most likely of the 2 to come back. It just seems like it's a little bit easier to roll him forward another year to continue to being the Mike, the way Steve Spagnuolo talks about him. But I don't know. The more I watched as the year went on and we got to the playoffs, not only were the splash plays that Justin Reid were making higher difficulty plays, they were bigger, they were more impactful. And then you look at the rest of the safety room, and like Brian Cook was losing reps to Jaden Hicks. And it's not that Hicks was playing lights out or bad. He was just playing okay for a rookie, but like they didn't really have a guy that looked like they were ready to step in to Justin Reid's shoes whatsoever. And I don't know if Spag's secondary and all those coverage rotations will survive without a very smart veteran leader in a safety spot like Justin Reid. So I'm a little bit torn on which way I think this goes.
I understand why you might be a little bit torn on this. I do think that one is probably back. I think the one that is back. Hold on a second. I got a 3-year-old interrupting me.
No, you're good.
Jackson.
So yeah.
He had a lightsaber, but it was a lightsaber that was talking. He's fine. Anyways, I think Nick Bolton's the player that winds up coming back between these 2. And there's a few reasons why. Justin Reid will be 29 this offseason. He turns 29 in a week and a half. So you're paying a safety into his 30s. Bolton is 24 as of today. I think he turns 25 in March. So right before free agency, he's going to turn 25 years old. I think the Chiefs did a really good thing not paying Bolton this past offseason. And I think that they're actually going to set themselves up in a pretty good situation for 2025's free agency when it comes to Bolton. They could have tried to get him done early. And they let him, I think they kind of let things play out the way they did, right? I don't think Bolton played to a level that elevates his free agency stock to a level that's going to see him exceed his market in 2025, I think he's going to get paid similar to what like a Patrick Queen did, somewhere in that $13 to $15 million range, maybe with a little bit of inflation for last year's contract. I think a $13 to $15 million range puts him, I think, just outside or right at the top 10 for linebackers when he comes from an APY perspective. I think that's a fair market for a player in Bolton who is loved by this organization, who's probably more valuable to the Chiefs than any other team. I think you pay Bolton. I think Bolton's the one that gets paid. And I will say, like, I think Justin Reid was a better player for the Chiefs in 2024. But I think this is a conversation more about 2026 and 7 in the future of this organization, the future of this team. Paying a guy on the wrong side of 30 hasn't been something that the Chiefs have typically done. Justin Reid will be on the wrong side of 30 for the majority of this contract. And Bolton's still, he's still a young player. And he's revered by this organization and loved by this organization. I think they find a fair market value deal for Nick Bolton. And I think you live with that. You get a guy that connects your front and your back seven. You get a smart player in the middle of that defense. And yeah, I know it's a tough pill to swallow to pay a guy handsomely for someone that you're kind of protecting when it comes to some of your coverage calls. But I think that's what Steve Spagnuolo values, the mental side, something that we don't really, we're not as privy to on the outside looking in as the Chiefs organization is.
Well, so here's the thing. I think if you look at $13 million, even as the floor, I think puts him as like the 6th highest paid off-ball linebacker. It's kind of tricky to find all the different like linebacker contracts and stuff like that, but I think it would go Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Tremaine Edwards, Patrick Queen, Matt Milano, then Nick Bolton. And
I think Bond will get more than him. So I just said top 10,
sure.
top 5.
And there might be some. That's pretty hefty for, I think, those names I listed off, and then you get to Bolton, and I feel like there's a pretty significant drop there. And I'm with you from the aspect of the way this season and even last year went with the injury for Bolton. And then this year, I don't think he played himself up into that next bracket. He didn't play himself up into getting a well above Patrick Queen money, to getting the Milano, Tremaine Edmonds type money. He didn't play himself into that range, which I'm sure he was thinking. After his first 2 years, it seemed like he was going to be well on his way to at least having like suitors that would be willing to pay that much. But after the past 2 years, I think the injury slowed him down. And then I think we've kind of seen offenses, opponents kind of adapt to what his strengths and weaknesses are. And I've tweeted this out. He's such a weird player to try to figure out because he plays Mike for the Chiefs. So he plays as the middle linebacker. He's very smart. He makes all the plays. He makes all the calls. He's a very dynamic player. So like when he reads stuff out very well, he makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage, especially on big third downs and in big moments. He does that exceptionally well. And when you have him kind of like trail plays from behind, he's really good flowing with the play from behind and then shooting a gap as like a running back tries to make, a cutback or something. It's like there's some really good stuff to his game. But then you look at the other issues is doesn't really take on blocks particularly well. He can be run at or he can be run around. And then in coverage, he kind of, I don't want to say is lost, but the change of direction and like the lack of length and just presence that he has is really felt. So I don't know. I feel like I described the 1990s Will linebacker when their coverage responsibilities weren't that strong. It was more just being able to run and chase stuff, but we're in 2025. And he plays Mike. Like there's no weird place to really put him that hides those deficiencies in the modern NFL. So it's hard for me to see paying him linchpin of your defense kind of money, which paying a linebacker $13 to $15 million is what you're doing. I don't disagree that Spags will consider it. It'll be on the radar. It's just, I look at where his shortcomings are and how that fits into a defense. It's really hard for me to start putting him in the stratosphere of those other names we talked about at the top.
Well, I mean, make no mistake about it. Like he got picked on in coverage during the postseason. Like teams targeted him when they needed to try to generate offense. And so like that was definitely something that this team had to navigate through and protect him a little bit. I think, it's a lot of it is intangible. It's the mental side. And he does some things. He does some little things on the field. Like I'm very impressed with some of the things that he's able to do. That he executed that blitz call that Steve Spagnuolo call, and like they were connected on that. Spags and Bolton were connected on that blitz call that they made in the Super Bowl against the Niners last year. And
his fake dropout to beat Juergens, I think it was in the Super Bowl this year, was it the Hurts interception play where he like faked like he was going to drop out when he sees Juergens turn his hips, he goes like, great play, fantastic play. I would be very clear. I'm not saying he's a bad football player. I just think that he's in the wrong era of football for his skill set, and that makes it hard.
It does. But it's like, I think it's the little small intangible things that, like, it's not necessarily making the play. It's things like setting up the blitz for Nick for Trent McDuffie to clean it up. Those are the things that endear him to this organization, and it endears him to the rest of that defense too, right? Players want to play hard for Nick Bolton and Steve Spagnuolo, and so how do you value that? And from the outside looking in, it's not as easy. I think Justin Reed made more impactful plays this year. I think, especially the Super Bowl, Justin Reed had a good Super Bowl. He did some really good things in that game.
I want to talk about Reed. Like, you're talking about little things that Nick Bolton does and how it kind of sets up everything else. I would say that Justin Reed sets up just as much as Nick Bolton does. It's not the vocal aspect, but you don't get to do all the rotating safety stuff with a slot corner dropping to a deep half or a safety rolling down to play a curl flat if you don't have a safety that, one, knows how to do it, but they can also communicate it and then is a threat to do everything on any given play. And that's Justin Reed. It's not, as of right now, Brian Cook. It's not Hicks at this moment in time. Like, they don't have somebody that does what Justin Reed does for this team. What he's able to do as a safety that can play in a deep half, that can give you a surprise rep as a center fielder, can step down in the box, can be your force player on the outside. Like, he puts on so many different hats for this defense that I think if you lose him, I think you're going to see a linebacker group that you just talked about can be stressed, can be attacked. You're going to lose your ability to help that linebacker group without Justin Reed. If you're going to have Brian Cook and Hicks out there and Shamari Connor as your 3 safety rotation, trying to figure out how to help Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil in coverage, or to help Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal in coverage, I think it gets a lot dicier. Like, it gets a lot riskier because you have to be a little bit more static. You can't be as exotic. You don't have the chess piece on the back end moving around. Now you just have a bunch of guys that are improving in Hicks and other guys that are good in their specific areas, but you don't have that piece that ties it all together. And so we go back to when Spags got here. What's the first thing he did? He said, go get me a leader at safety. And backer and Hitchens. Like, he liked Anthony Hitchens for similar reasons, but he wanted Tyrann Mathieu. He said, I want that guy to be the leader of my safety room. And then I use him as like this a little pocket knife that can do a little bit of everything. What do they do when Tyrann Mathieu's kind of time in Kansas City ends? They still want the leader. They still want a guy that allows them to do everything, but they want to be more physical. They go get Justin Reed to do the same exact role. That's been a very, go back to Giants, Landon Collins. That's what he did for them. That is an important role for Spags. So that's where I think Justin Reed kind of did make a late push in my mind to be like, maybe he would be not preferred, but at least be in a little bit more contention for that one guy that Spags wants back above all else.
I think the trouble with apples to apples, maybe, like, like if it's a in a vacuum or some kind of comparison, like, maybe, but Justin Reed's the 12th highest paid safety. He's 29 years old. He's probably going to get more APY than $10.5 million, I think, from some team this year.
You think so?
I think so.
So see, I was thinking he might actually be quite a bit cheaper. I mean, that'd be interesting. I mean, I guess I'm looking at the safety contracts now. Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I think he's probably getting the Grant Delpit kind of deal. 3 years, $12 million APY. Gonna put him, Jalen Thompson, $12 million.
He's better than Grant. He's great. He's better than those guys. So, I mean, like, yeah, but they're younger. I don't know. It's interesting.
That's where things, I think, get tricky for this team, right? Is,
Kyle Duggar's 1 year younger than Justin Reed. Let that soak in.
And Kyle Duggar just got $14.5 million. You honestly might be talking about one of these guys catching a 15 mil APY, Bolton or Reed, if we're being honest. Like, it might be one of them getting a very similar number. Okay, Marcus Williams and Justin Reed are the 2 best safeties in the free agency market too. So
yeah,
teams are going to be paying.
It's tricky, man. It's tricky on which one of these guys, like, I think that gets paid, which guy doesn't, and whichever one doesn't get paid, the Chiefs will have quite a bit of, here we go. We'll have quite a bit of hole that needs to be filled pretty quick.
Yeah, there's tough decisions for both of them. Joe Dugan, could we trade Bolton for a draft pick, or is he an unrestricted free agent? So the Chiefs could theoretically tag Nick Bolton and then try to trade him. The problem with that is Nick Bolton is a linebacker, and unfortunately, the way the franchise tag works, linebacker edge rushers, outside linebackers are bunched in with like your regular off-ball linebackers. And so when you're talking about like what the franchise tag is for for the linebacker position as a whole, it's astronomically big for
27
for an off-ball linebacker. So you're tying up $27 million in cap space that keeps you from being able to figure out the rest of your offseason and then trying to trade somebody. There's really not that much leverage you have because, by the way, you're not paying an off-ball linebacker $27 million. There's no off-ball linebacker worth $27 million. Fred Warner's making 19. You're talking about like 40% more. So, no, they're not going to do that. And so they're going to and early reports, Chiefs aren't going to be leveraging the franchise tag at all, which I think I get. I don't think this is
I forgot how much the safety market jumped in it looks like the big jump was from 23 to 24. So from 2023 to 2024. But even if you track it back to 2020, right? The franchise, just look at the franchise tag was 11 million, which is like the average roughly of the 5 highest paid safety contracts. $11 million the franchise tag is safety. You look at now, you're looking at like 18 or 19 million. We're nearing doubled over the 6-year span there. Just the safety market really kind of jumped up a little bit. And I do wonder if you start to see it get devalued as teams go back to, or continue to slam home these too high Vic Fangio shells where it's just about prevention. But I mean, you're a year or two away from that, having an impact on the contracts you're giving out now. But I forgot how high safety contracts got recently.
All right. We're going to talk about the offensive line and a lot of decisions that they have to make right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
5 key decisions for the Chiefs this offseason going through, and we've talked about the defensive issues that they have to figure out. The Travis Kelce, but now it's time to talk about the offensive line. And we could have led with this one very easily. This is one that has been in the minds.
You buried the lead.
Me and Maddie have been talking for the last week about the offensive line. Some would say arguing about Ronnie Stanley today. We'll ask Eisen. He was just observing. He just had the popcorn out while we were just going back and forth in the group chat. But just there's so many trickle down issues with the offensive line that this team's going to have to figure out. Obviously, Trey Smith is going to be a free agent. It is expected the Chiefs will not be franchising Trey Smith, who will very likely earn $23 million APY, maybe more. I think he's going to secure an absolute bag. And let's start with Trey Smith and the Trey Smith decision. I am of the belief that the Chiefs should not be letting blue chip players walk out their door. I think just making sure that they have blue chip players on this roster around Patrick Mahomes should be a priority. Continuing to any blue chips that you acquire via the draft, try to pay them. Make sure you're paying them. It's tough with the prices that Trey Smith could potentially garner. I think that they should try to pay their blue chips. I think they should try to figure out how to pay Trey Smith and Trent McDuffie, both of whom I believe are blue chip players, because it's hard to replace true blue chips. How many times can I say blue chips in a sentence? I don't know. We're going to find out. But I just think the longer I think about it, and as daunting as this offseason looks like with so many things that this team has to address, I'm having a harder time justifying paying the price that it would take to keep Trey Smith in Kansas City. So I am definitely struggling with this one.
Yeah, it's tough. Early in the year, I think I was kind of making the case that Trey Smith is the guy that you probably try to pay to keep around to continue to be one of the anchor points of your interior of your offensive line. Joe Thuney's getting up there in age. You probably have there's an end coming to what Joe Thuney's providing you, right? And so maybe you transition to Trey Smith being the other guard, but the more it's gone on, the more you look around the NFL, the more you hear people connected to the NFL talk about how important teams are finding interior offensive linemen right now. It's getting hard for me to believe the Chiefs are going to come out and compete in the $20 million per year range for Trey Smith. And then when it gets into a bidding war of multiple teams wanting to fill a plug and play, very, very good top 5, at minimum right guard, if not just offensive guard in the NFL, especially in a better system suited for him, that that number is going to get so high so fast. And I just don't know if the Chiefs are going to be ready to go into that war. Like, I don't know if they want that bidding war. And so, like, you look at some of his projected market value, you're like right around 20, 21 million per year. I think multiple teams being interested is going to drive that up even higher.
Absolutely.
It's a tough spot. It's a tough spot for the Chiefs to be in. And you would really want to keep Trey Smith, but he's also made less than $1 million per year in the NFL because he was such a late round draft pick. He has not, I mean, like, he's making good money because he's a professional athlete, but
Jack
he's not getting
Jack Stack's paying him millions.
He's not getting paid like he's about to be. So, like, if there was ever a time for a player to be like, it kind of makes sense to go after the biggest deal you can, it's right now when you are coming off being a day 3 draft pick. And like, I don't mean to say that to like crude or anything about it, but like, eventually you want to get paid. You don't know how long you're going to play football, right? You don't know how long it's going to last. When there's a lot of money sitting out there, if somebody's especially willing to go high in the guaranteed and give you a lot per year, like, that's tough to turn down when you haven't made that much comparative to your peers that are playing at that level.
So Chris Lindstrom, actually, we'll look at Robert Hunt's contract. That's probably a good one. The Eagles did a good job of signing Landon Dickerson to an extension. They got him on a 4-year deal for 21 APY, but they only paid him $29 million in guaranteed money. Robert Hunt got a 5-year, $100 million contract with $44 million guaranteed over 5 years. I think Trey Smith will eclipse those. I think he will get 22 million. He'll get a 4 or 5 year at 22 million APY, and the percentage of guaranteed money that he gets will be higher than what Robert Hunt got at $44 million. I think that's the kind of market that you're looking at for him. And I mean, that is astronomical money. That is incredible money for what Trey Smith is probably going to get. He might, and look, Chris Lindstrom got a 5-year, $103 million contract at 20.5 APY. That guaranteed money was $48 million over 5 years. I could see it flips in that one too. I could see it being 50%.
He's younger than all these other guys that are signing these contracts. So all these names you've mentioned were older than him when they were signed. The youngest looks like Landon Dickerson was 27 when he signed his deal. And the way that, the Eagles kind of, I don't want to say finagle it. The Eagles do a very smart thing by paying a lot of cash up front because their owner will. But like, out of all these guys, like, he's going to be Trey Smith's 25. Maybe he turns 26 before the deal will be signed. I don't know.
In June. He turns 26 in June.
So yeah, he's 25, 26 years old when he signs this. That's younger than all these other guys that were coming up. So like, yeah, a 5-year deal.
Robert Hunt got that deal at 27 years old. So yeah.
I think he's getting paid. So that turns us to the next page. I've seen this going around, and I do believe that we got the question in here. Okay, so another tag and trade question from Robert here. What's the likelihood of tagging Trey Smith and trading to a team like Chicago, New England, at the Tennessee in there for the obvious connection? Okay, on one hand, I'm about to say I would struggle to see a way where a team is willing to trade draft capital and then spend a lot of money on an offensive guard, right? That double hit for an interior offensive lineman seems like a little bit, we're still a few years away from where the NFL is going to value interior offensive linemen that way. However, if you're just trying to recoup a 5th round pick, some kind of mid-day 3 pick or something like that, maybe a team would be willing to do it. Like, I don't know how protected they would be for something like that. So I'd say there's a slim chance. I just don't think the return for the player would be very big. And then the issue for the Chiefs is they'd have to be willing to, they would have to be ready to go, or they have to be willing to carry that cap hit until they ironed out the entire deal. You don't want to get stuck in the L'Jarius Sneed situation that they were stuck in last year, where it was taking up too much of the cap space for them to, get to do maybe anything, or, to exert all their options on everything.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing this team being able to do that. And if they're going to completely unload a lot of their free agents and just not bring them back, there's a chance that and depending on how much they're going to spend in free agency, there's a chance the Chiefs could recoup a 3rd round pick in 2026 out of Trey Smith. So you've got to take that into consideration as you're navigating all that as well. There's a chance there's a chance he nets you a top 100 pick in 2026. A little delayed gratification there, just depending on how they navigate the compensatory formula. So if we're
real quick before we go tackle, I just want to say before we go to the tackle, I don't know where you were going next. So
tackle.
Okay, I want to before that. I think we're on the same page here. The Chiefs fix for offensive guard. You and I believe we're on the same page. We think that player's already on the roster.
Yes.
whoever it's going to be, it's going to be a little bit of a competition. Maybe it's a Wanya Morris, maybe it's Kingsley, maybe it's Hansen. Like, I don't know who it's going to be. I would lean towards one of the first two, but I think Kent and I are on the same page that we assume that the answer for right guard is going to be on the roster, and they're not going to be trying to draft an offensive guard in the top 75 picks to step in and start at right guard right away.
I think that's probably the case. I think they tried. I think, like I said, I think I had a intrusive thought the other day on Saturday. I was like, what if the left tackle competition in 2024 is actually just the right guard competition in 2025, where Wanye and Kingsley are both battling it out to be the right guard for this team? And like the Chiefs have already started cross-training Kingsley Suamataia there. I think one of those two can play more capably along that interior, and then they played out at the left tackle spot. Like, I think you give them an off season to focus on that. I think one of them can come out of this okay, and it's easier to navigate that than it is the tackle that you put out on an island by himself. And so, try to get something out of both of these guys is a shrewd business decision that, if you can figure everything else out, would be very beneficial to this team and how they're trying to build the rest of this roster. It makes them easier to make some of these other decisions if you are penciling in one of those guys to be your guard in 2025. The tackle position, though, boy howdy, we talked a little bit.
What you just said, that means that Kingsley Suamataia and Wanya Morris maybe not as involved in the left tackle competition spot for next year as fans would have hoped. Now, this is no guarantee, right? Like, we're a long way away from them, even like for any fan knowing this decision, but it's just cross-training Suamataia that early.
Get it right.
Playing, I'm going to say it differently every single time for the rest of the show, by the way. And so having him come out and play left guard in that final game, clearly they were cross-training him a little bit at it. Morris, we haven't seen play as much guard. I know he has in the preseason and in training camp a little bit, but they've predominantly left him at tackle. So we'll see what they do with him. It's just, I feel like we aren't trending, at least as of right now, towards those two guys heavily competing for the left tackle job, which means it's wide open, but it also opens them up to step in and, compete and or start at right guard.
Well, and let's look at it just logically. The Chiefs say Kingsley Suamataia is cross-training along the interior. Wanya Morris is a scratch, and I believe a healthy scratch from the playoff roster. Like, that's not inspiring a ton of confidence in someone.
I saw the funniest tweet. Somebody had against the Raiders, Mahomes touchdown pass to Watson, where he was getting hit with his body, getting hit one way, throws back across his shoulder, the other way. It's a great threat, touchdown. And the thing was like, yeah, Mahomes is so done that he didn't even celebrate this touchdown. He just got up cussing out his left tackle, which was Wanya Morris at the time. And that was essentially right before he got pulled for the rest of the year. So I think that one highlight that I just ran of a tweet that I saw today, and I'm sorry if, you listen and you have that tweet out there today. I did see it. I thought it was funny. I forgot who it was, but that I think tells you the state of Wanya Morris starting at tackle for the Chiefs right now.
Yeah. So you've got yet another offseason where the Chiefs are going to try to figure out the left tackle spot again. And we talked about it, last week, and I'll defend the Chiefs' thought process over the last few years. Like, I don't think there's been great options for them to try to fix the tackle position in a meaningful way, except for drastically overpaying what Orlando Brown Jr. wound up getting on the open market, which I think would have been really foolish. Beyond, I've tried to trade up for Anton Harrison, I believe, personally, and who knows, maybe that would be it. Outside of that, there's really not a ton of great options for them. And this year, guess what? There's not a ton of great options at the left tackle position in free agency. There's really just not a ton to be excited about. Every single one of these guys has issues. Cam Robinson, not good. Traded mid-season. Ronnie Stanley played one healthy season, one full season his entire career, and it just happened to be this contract year where he's trying to get the bag the last time. Tyron Smith, old as I am, didn't play particularly well in New York. And then, there's just a bunch of other, there's a bunch of other issues when it comes to the free agents. Jedrick Wills has been hurt and not played well. 26 years old. I could see the Chiefs really liking the pedigree. Alaric Jackson, Joseph Noteboom's short arm tackles. There's some short arm tackles in this market. I will say there's one guy that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about. And I'm not even sure if we really talked about him last time. DJ Humphries. Ever heard of him? I could see
No?
a scenario. I do think the Chiefs are addressing free agency. I think the Chiefs will come out of free agency with a left tackle. I think I'll be fascinated to see what the
Left tackle.
I will be fascinated to see what level of left tackle they come out of here with. Is it one that can be beat out by a draft pick, perhaps a first-round pick? Is it one that they invested enough to name him the starter and move on? There's not a lot of great options out there, and it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a challenge for this team to try to figure it out yet again, Matty.
For sure. I mean, there's not a particularly good option. I disagree with Kent about Ronnie Stanley. We don't need to bring that whole debate here. I would be fine with trying to pay Ronnie Stanley because I think
how much
when he plays, you're getting very nice here. Maybe we'll look up contracts. Offensive tackle contracts. This is great podcasting as we all sit here and dive into these numbers now.
Would you pay him $18.5 million?
Yes.
Over 3 years?
Sure. I mean, it's going to fully guaranteed? No, but yes.
Okay. Most of the tackles are, somewhere 45-50% of their contract guaranteed. So
yeah, that's fine.
3 years, $55 million for Ronnie Stanley over the left tackle spot.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Okay. And that's like your
I'm looking here.
Free agent move?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm looking here. I'm just looking at left tackles. You said 18. I mean, that's putting him at like below guys. That's putting him below guys like Ryan Ramczyk, who's like half retired. And I understand that doesn't like that wasn't.
I'm looking at left tackles only.
So yeah. He's left tackle. Okay, sorry. I thought I had left tackle. Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, I understand why people wouldn't. Even if you're just looking at left tackles, this puts you outside the top 10. You're getting him tied with Colton Miller. And this is what Cam Robinson was on the franchise tag last year. Was that a deal? No, that was a deal. You're paying him the same much. Yeah, definitely. I would deal with the injury history because here's the issue. We're going to talk about it now. There's no good answers. There's no good options for left tackle. Like I get it. The route the Chiefs probably go is DJ Humphries and they try to draft somebody. Guess what? Since 2020, the average amount of offensive tackles off the board by pick 30, 5.5. Go look at this offensive tackle class, take 6 of them off the board, and tell me how great you feel about that guy beating out DJ Humphries, who couldn't beat out Joe Thuney last year. Oh, he had a hamstring. Sure, he did, but we don't know what level he's going to be. So, like, I feel like going in with DJ Humphries and the dice roll of a rookie offensive tackle is very quickly putting you down the exact same path that you had last year. The only difference is now you're adding DJ Humphries to the mix, and last year you opted not to bring back Donovan Smith because you thought you could do better. That's just as scary of a dice roll as wasting a year, a year and a half worth of fully guaranteed contract to Ronnie Stanley. That's just as dangerous to me as him getting hurt again versus giving you the competent to very good left tackle play that he has given at points in his career when he's going to be healthy. So risk I'm willing to take. I know not everyone's going to agree with that. So if we assume, and I assume the Chiefs aren't going to be spending big on Stanley, back to the drawing board of DJ Humphries and hope the 6th best offensive tackle in the class is good. And that is terrifying.
Well, Will Campbell, Kelvin, and you're going to say guard. Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, Josh Simmons, Armand Membu, Josh Connerly, Ariante Ursary.
No, you're hard out. Hard out on Ursary. That doesn't belong in there. Yeah, and Donovan Jackson. So if all of those guys play tackle, you were hoping that
Donovan Jackson.
All those guys are gone. No, he had 6. He's number 6.
Okay.
So
Connerly,
Ursary?
Membu,
No.
Simmons, Banks. Yeah, I mean, it's probably Ursary. Kansas City kid. Ariante Ursary.
And that's not a relevant pick. I just like that's me going into next year with that. I don't mean he's a terrible player. I just mean like going into next year relying on that is a scary proposition. And this is obviously one of those guys could fall. The Chiefs can make a trade up. I'm just saying, like in general, saying DJ Humphries, the guy who couldn't beat out Joe Thuney, who is the cause of us freaking out about left tackle right now, along with Wanya Morris and along with Subatia, all those guys that causing the freak out. DJ Humphries couldn't beat them out, right? He couldn't beat them out last year. And so that's your bar that you want to set.
Can he beat them out with a full off season healthy?
I don't know.
I think
we don't know.
I think
I would assume he can. Hey, before pre-injury, DJ Humphries was better than them. It's also been 2 years since he's been healthy now, right? Like it's been a minute since he's been fully healthy. So like, what does he now look like? Because he's not young anymore. It's just that's not a safe bar, right? That's not a safe. I feel better with that if you felt good about the development of one of your other guys and you wanted to bring him in so that they could then go jump over him after you've already seen them. Right now, you're just gambling on whatever player you bring in as a rookie, and that That's where it gets scary.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers here. That's another big offseason decision for this team. Rashee Rice should be back in a in a significant capacity health-wise. Obviously, there's going to be some questions looming about a suspension that he'll probably have to serve somewhere along the line. You're going to get the Xavier Worthy experience yet again. But kind of outside of that, there's a lot kind of up in the air about what this team is going to do at the wide receiver spot. In fact, every other receiver of significance and of note is not available or is not on this roster. You're talking Hollywood Brown, Justin Watson, Juju, Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins, McCole Hardman. All those guys will be gone. It'll be Worthy, Rice, Sky Moore, Nico Remigio on the roster. So with all these other things that we're talking about, oh, by the way, the Chiefs are still going to need to have to figure some things out at the receiver position as well, Maddie.
Yeah, this is another one that the situation with Rashee Rice obviously dictates a lot, and he's coming off an injury. There's a potential looming suspension that we don't have a lot of details on right now. So I think that determines the level of wide receiver play need. Obviously, you still need wide receivers to this team. They have two guys under contract that should see snaps on the football field right now, and it's Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, and both of them are very good. That's a very good place to start. What are you doing after them, though, right? And if you think there's a chance that Rashee Rice might miss half of next year with injury recovery, suspension, or whatever, you probably need a very good wide receiver to go along with them, or a highly valued piece to go in there. If you think he's going to be back by week 3 and healthy by week 3, maybe you don't need such a high valued piece, and it can be a third, fourth wide receiver, and you try to get by until then. It's just, you got to figure out more information. I will say what's got me a little worried is this isn't just an ACL injury. I think there's still been some confusion about the injury that Rashee Rice has. Like, this is a little bit more intense than just tearing your ACL. It's the whole PLC corner that he's got going on in there, the posterior lateral corner. So there's multiple different ligaments and tendons that could be involved. All we know for sure, I believe, is the LCL and the hamstring tendon, or a hamstring tendon from the bicep femoris, right? What is that going to result in? It's not a common injury. That's not an injury you see a lot on the football field. Is it like a quad tendon tear where he's now at best getting back to 90% of previous injury explosion on that leg? Or is it something like an ACL where you can return to 100% in most cases? Like, we don't know where that's going to be at right now. So it's just, that's a scary thing to look at when you're relying on him heavily to be one of your two key wide receivers.
I do think, early reports from Andy Reid seem to indicate that he's in a good spot. He should be back for 2025. And so hopefully that does bear out and he continues his progress and is able to play at a high quality level in 2025, because this team badly needs him, but they're going to need more than just him and Worthy. Because we're anticipating a suspension from Rashee Rice. Is it as simple? I'm going to ask the question. Is it as simple as just bringing back Hollywood Brown, Maddie?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a tricky question. If it's for the same contract that he signed this past year, maybe even a little bit less, it's another year of injury. Sure. Like, it's worth it to bring it back. I don't know if Hollywood Brown solves anything though. Cause I go back and look again at how he was used when he came back, and maybe it's because of the injury and getting used to stuff, but his usage was even more gimmicky than what Xavier Worthy's was. He was the guy getting all the protected stuff. And when he was getting hey, we need you to go win this route right here for us because you are the backside guy that's isolated, or you're the point man on this play, he wasn't really doing that a ton. And I know the offense wasn't running super well. It'll be different and better next year. So maybe he has a bigger season like we were all excited for going to this year, with another full training camp, hopefully being healthy the whole time. It's just, from what we saw, I don't have a ton of hope that it fixes stuff, but I do think given the price that he'll cost, he's certainly worth bringing back. And that at least gives you Worthy plus Hollywood Brown as at least a decent enough starting point until Rashee Rice is fully ready to go.
We did get this question from Anonymous Mango. Do you think it's a given that Nico Remigio is on the 53 next season? Feels like he earned a spot at the kick returner, punt returner spot. Would like to see him get some offensive snaps. So I do think Nico Remigio will be back on this roster on the 53-man. I think he will serve as the returner for this team in 2025. The outlook for him as a receiver, though, I still just don't have a ton of belief that he's going to make any big impact at the receiver position. I have a hard time believing that the Chiefs are going to build any kind of plan that involves him being a focal point or a key part of this offense. I think anything you get out of him is something that you're surprised by during this offseason, during OTAs and mini camp and training camp, that extends beyond just training camp, which has been a problem for him. I do think that he gets a spot on the roster for special teams purposes, but I do think it's a big uphill battle for him to be able to see anything significant in the passing game. Maddie, I do think, going back to, some of the stuff with Hollywood Brown, it's just hard to find somebody else in free agency that's really going to help them make a difference. And maybe part of this is you have to be creative with some trades. You've got to try to figure out, to a way to get a key pass catcher somewhere, be it, a tight end to replace Travis Kelce, or, find a receiver that's available out on the market. Maybe there's going to be some players that become available in the market that you can try to trade for. I just have a hard time seeing a ton of receivers that make a ton of sense for the Chiefs in free agency.
Yeah. I mean, this offense has been in such a weird spot for years because we talked about at the top, right? This is back to the Kelce conundrum and like how you want to put pieces around that. And we don't know what this offense looks like without him. We saw them lose Tyreek Hill and then have to change what they are. But if you look at what the constant was, it's still what was there to get them out of the jail free card, to get them away from all the hurdles. They still had Travis Kelce, who was able to do the Travis Kelce thing. Without that, we have no clue what this team looks like. It's one thing to go say, hey, we're going to get the best vertical, fastest, deep ball tracking winner. And I'm not saying Worthy's that or not, but get that guy to replace Tyreek Hill's role. You can try that. You can't try to go replace what Travis Kelce does. That guy doesn't really exist. And the offense is kind of centered around that. So finding pieces going forward that aren't centered around Travis Kelce is going to be a different projection than what we have dealt with as fans about this Chiefs team. So it's even hard to begin to project the pieces that are going to fit in and slot in and how they're going to want to do that.
I know Bill Barnwell posted some cut candidates. I'll just throw a few at him because I don't think the Chiefs are going to trade for Tyreek Hill, and I don't think the Chiefs are going to trade for Deebo Samuel. So I'll give you some cut candidates. Just a quick yes or no. Devontae Adams.
Too expensive.
Christian Kirk. Cut candidate.
I don't see what he does that makes me where am I putting him that's not where Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy should be.
Cooper Kupp.
I think he's washed, but if he comes for a washed veteran wide receiver contract, I could see how he could be this year's version of a DeAndre Hopkins swing.
Tyler Lockett.
Okay. You got my interest a little bit.
Okay.
He's played mostly outside. He's mostly played as an outside wide receiver, despite being a little bit slighter. He offers zero yak right now. He just wants to catch the ball and fall down, but he still gets open. I would have to watch and see really how he gets open, but that one at least intrigues me a little bit. You at least got my interest with that one.
Okay. Let's go to the defensive line. We have talked a lot about we're going to go over an hour, Maddie.
Let's go. Big money. You owe me a buck.
So I think the Chiefs' defensive line was capable this year. I think it was built around Chris Jones, and I think some of the supplemental pieces were fine, but not necessarily overwhelming. This team is also going to be without one of their better defensive linemen in 2024, one of their best defensive linemen in 2024, unless they get rid of them or bring him back. Sorry, you got Tershawn Wharton and Charles Omenihu. Both are free agents in this year's class. Returning is Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. So the Chiefs have a lot of their edge players, but along the interior, they don't have a ton of production back outside of Chris Jones. And what's more, they need more juice at the defensive end position. How are you navigating the defensive line? This is a pretty big decision for this team.
Yeah, they still need talent in the defensive line room. They have continued to not invest in defensive tackles to go next to Chris Jones, and whether that means true nose tackles, other one-tech pass rushers, or even quality backup three techs. Like Tershawn Wharton had had a great year, right? He's going to get himself paid. He might even have got himself out of Kansas City with how well he played this year for a team that gets super desperate for interior pass rush, right? Like that's a possibility, but they haven't really invested in defensive tackles around Chris Jones. It's been Chris Jones and the gaggle of guys that they throw around them just to kind of, eat up snaps and do whatever. So yeah, they could use defensive tackles, but from what we've seen since the Jaron Reed experiment, where they tried to bring him in, pay him a little bit of money after he had gotten cut that first time. And it didn't, he was good with it, Chris Jones. Like, it worked out well, but not enough that it was worth the money. They've just continued to just have guys around Chris Jones. I assume you'll get more of that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Pennell or Nadi come back and be the starting nose tackle, or at least heavily in the rotation. They do need to sign some bodies. And so, if they can't bring back Wharton, I would expect them to bring in some, free agent defensive tackle, mid-level guy. Even if they plan on drafting somebody early, I think they still need those kind of signings. I don't think there's a lot of that's not a fun thought to go down, because I think it's pretty clear what they'll do at defensive tackle. Maybe they draft someone early, but in terms of free agency, they're going to do the same thing they always do. I think defensive end's a lot more interesting, because if they lose Charles Omenihu, what do they do? Nobody wants to see Mike Dana start, right? He's a fun rotational player. He's a fun guy to put out there to provide energy, to move around, and be versatile up and down the offense or defensive line. You don't want to see Mike Dana playing a ton of snaps. That's not his wheelhouse. So are you ready to turn everything over to Felix? Is that the move? He's gotten better. He showed flash strides this year, right? But I don't know if he showed you enough to say, oh, that's a guy we need to play 70% of the snaps right now and get away with it. They need another defensive end too. And it's the same thing. Whether it's this one, I think I could see them paying a little bit more for a defensive end in free agency than I could defensive tackle, I believe, is where I've kind of settled right now.
I think that's probably right, just because of how this team has approached it. And unfortunately, you're right. I do think that, Turk's probably played himself out of a situation where, he's going to be attainable for this team without a significant investment. He's did good on him, man. He did some really good things. He did some really good things this year, and I'm happy for him, especially coming back from that injury, being able to get the bag. But I mean, yeah, it's they probably need to invest in the defensive end position in a tangible way. I think the problem is going to be who is that? What kind of mid-level edge rushers really are there out there for them? Looking at the free agent class, I could see them taking a look at, do they try to go to a veteran? Do they try to go find some, edge rusher that's going to get released? Do they look at a Joey Bosa? Would you go grab Joey Bosa? Would you go grab a Sam Hubbard? Those are some cut candidates here. A Von Miller. Do you go try to chase the bag with one of these veteran edge rushers?
I mean, it always comes down to if the price is right, sure, you take the swing, but I think you're definitely going to play a lot more closer to the market of what they did with Charles Omenihu, right? Where you're maybe giving somebody some you find a mid-level deal of a guy that's maybe not going to be at his peak level of contract, because in his case, it was a suspension. Maybe you're looking for somebody that you can incentivize because they're coming off a down year or a down 2 years and just get better play. I don't think they're looking for a pure clear-cut starter. I think they're looking for a guy to join a rotation of Dana and Felix across from George Karlaftis. And I think that's just going to be a less exciting guy, but somebody that once they make the move, that kind of makes sense.
What, Chase Young?
Yeah, if that neck checks out, if his neck checks out and all, that's somebody that I think probably enters into that same realm, right? You don't want him starting all the plays, but also for the Chiefs team, he might be the starter across from Karlaftis, but you don't feel bad subbing him in and out for those other guys, getting them reps.
Yeah, maybe a Dayo Odeyingbo, who I believe the Chiefs had some interest in the draft in 2021. Those are the kind of names that you're probably looking at.
Yeah, I think you're getting to those type of names, those type of guys that, again, nobody's going to be super excited when they come out and stuff like that, or if they get signed, but you're going to be okay, it makes sense. It's an improvement over the floor that is Mike Dana a little bit. And just kind of see what shakes out from there.
I don't know how excited I am about this draft class when it comes to the edge position too. So I could see this position being something that the Chiefs, the Chiefs try to, maybe try to draft and sign one, but I do think that they're looking at the edge class, I don't know, maybe if a Nick Scourton really is available down where the Chiefs are, the Texas A&M edge, for sure. But I don't know.
There's a handful of defensive ends, and we're going to talk a lot of draft here in the next couple of weeks and months, but there's a handful of defensive ends that I think could be had on day 2, probably mostly round 2, but maybe some round 3 that can do the Mike Dana thing where they play the run very well and they give you some effort pass rush. Like I do think there's a handful of those guys. So if that's all you want, like if you're maybe trying to find a guy with a better body type than Mike Dana, because he's a little undersized with shorter arms, you want a bigger player that can play the run and give you effort pass rush. I think you have, a handful of those guys that will be available to you. If you're looking for something better though, somebody that really can impact the game as a rusher, your options get pretty thin coming out of round 1. And even then, like you're not getting a lot of those guys to the end of round 1.
We do have a lot of stuff to talk about with the draft. And I mean, the defensive tackle class is very good. So I'm fascinated to see this team if they go and grab one in the draft because it's very deep there. We're gonna have a off season to be talking about that. There's a couple months until the draft, so we will be getting way more and more into the draft as this off season goes, and we can't wait. Like I said, KCSN Draft Guide is going to be launching tomorrow for pre-orders, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll be back on Wednesday. That is going to do it for this episode of the Casey Laboratory. Thank you so much for listening, watching, supporting.
65.
We love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later.
Big money show.